Ozma of Oz by L Frank Baum. Chapter 9. The Royal Family of Ev. The Tin Woodman was the first to address the meeting. To begin with, he said, word came to our noble and illustrious ruler Ozma of Oz that the wife and 10 children, 5 boys and 5 girls, of the former king of Ev, by name Evaldo, have been enslaved by the Gnome King and are held prisoners in his underground palace, and also that there was no one in Ev powerful enough to release them. Naturally, our Ozma wished to undertake the adventure of liberating the poor prisoners, but for a long time she could find no way to cross the great desert between the two countries. Finally, she went to a friendly sorceress of our land named Glinda the Good, who heard the story and at once presented Ozma a magic carpet which would continually unroll beneath our feet, so make a comfortable path for us to cross the desert. As soon as she had received the carpet, our gracious ruler ordered me to assemble our army, which I did. You behold in these bold warriors the pick of all the finest soldiers of Oz, and if we are obliged to fight the Gnome King, every officer, as well as the private, will battle fiercely until death. Then Tik-Tok spoke. Why should you fight the Gnome King? He asked. He has done no wrong. No wrong, cried Dorothy. Isn't it wrong to imprison a queen mother and her 10 children? They were sold to the Gnome King by King Evaldo, replied Tik-Tok. It was the King of Ev who did wrong, and when he realized what he had done, he jumped into the sea and drowned himself. This is news to me, said Ozma thoughtfully. I had supposed the Gnome King was all to blame in the matter, but in any case he must be made to liberate the prisoners. My uncle Evaldo was a very wicked man, declared the Princess Langwidere. If he had drowned himself before he sold his family, no one would have cared, but he sold them to the powerful Gnome King in exchange for a long life, and afterward destroyed the life by jumping into the sea. Then, said Ozma, he did not get the long life, and the Gnome King must give up the prisoners. Where are they confined? No one knows exactly, replied the princess, for the king, whose name is Roquat of the Rocks, owns a splendid palace underneath the great mountain, which is at the north end of this kingdom, and he has transformed the queen and her children into ornaments and bric-a-brac with which to decorate his rooms. I'd like to know, said Dorothy, who is this Gnome King? I will tell you, replied Ozma. He is said to be the ruler of the underground world, and commands the rocks and all that the rocks contain. Under his rule are many thousands of the gnomes, who are queerly shaped but powerful sprites that labor at the furnaces and forges of their king, making gold and silver and other metals which they conceal in the crevices of the rocks, so that those living upon the earth's surface can only find them with great difficulty. Also they make diamonds and rubies and emeralds, which they hide in the ground, so that the kingdom of the gnomes is wonderfully rich, and all we have of precious stones and silver and gold is what we take from the earth and rocks where the Gnome King has hidden them. I understand, said Dorothy, nodding her little head wisely. For the reason that we often steal his treasures, continued Ozma, the ruler of the underground world is not fond of those who live upon the earth's surface, and never appears among us. If we wish to see King Roquat of the Rocks, we must visit his own country, where he is all-powerful, and therefore it will be a dangerous undertaking. But for the sake of the poor prisoners, said Dorothy, we ought to do it. We shall do it, replied the Scarecrow, although it requires a lot of courage for me to go near to the furnaces of the Gnome King, for I am only stuffed with straw, and a single spark of fire might destroy me entirely. The furnaces may also melt my tin, said the Tin Woodman. But I am going. I can't bear heat, remarked the Princess Langwidere, yawning lazily. So I shall stay at home, but I wish you may have success in your undertaking, for I am heartily tired of ruling this stupid kingdom, and I need more leisure in which to admire my beautiful heads. We don't need you, said Ozma, for if with the aid of my brave followers I cannot accomplish my purpose, then it would be useless for you to undertake the journey. Quite true, sighed the princess. So if you'll excuse me, I will now retire to my cabinet. I've worn this head quite a while, and I want to change it for another. When she had left them, and you may be sure no one was sorry to see her go, Ozma said to Tik-Tok, "Will you join our party?" "I am the slave of the girl Dorothy, who rescued me from prison," replied the machine. "Where she goes, I will go." "Oh, I'm going with my friends, of course," said Dorothy quickly. "I wouldn't miss the fun for anything. Will you go too, Billina?" "To be sure," said Billina in a careless tone. She was smoothing down the feathers of her back and not paying much attention. "Heat is just in her line," remarked the Scarecrow. "If she's nicely roasted, she will be better than ever." "Then," said Ozma, "we will arrange to start for the kingdom of the gnomes at daybreak tomorrow, and in the meantime we will rest and prepare ourselves for the journey." Although, ah, ooh, although Princess Langwidere did not again appear to her guests, the palace servants waited upon the strangers from Oz, and did everything in their power to make the party comfortable. There were many vacant rooms at their disposal, and the brave army of 27 was easily provided for and liberally feasted. The Cowardly Lion and the Hungry Tiger were unharnessed from the chariot and allowed to roam at will throughout the palace, where they nearly frightened the servants into fits, although they did no harm at all. At one time Dorothy found the little maid Nanda crouching in terror in a corner with the Hungry Tiger standing before her. "You certainly look delicious," the beast was saying. "Will you kindly give me permission to eat you?" "No, no, no!" cried the maid in reply. "Then," said the tiger, yawning thoughtfully, "please to get me about 30 pounds of tenderloin steak, cooked rare, with a peck of boiled potatoes on the side, and 5 gallons of ice cream for dessert." "I'll do the best I can," said Nanda, and she ran away as fast as she could go. "Are you so very hungry?" asked Dorothy in wonder. "You can hardly imagine the size of my appetite," replied the tiger sadly. "It seems to fill my whole body from the end of my throat to the tip of my tail. I am very sure the appetite doesn't fit me, and is too large for the size of my body. Some day when I meet a dentist with a pair of forceps, I'm going to have it pulled." "What, your tooth?" asked Dorothy. "No, my appetite," said the Hungry Tiger. The little girl spent most of the afternoon talking with the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman, who related to her all that had taken place in the land of Oz since Dorothy had left it. She was much interested in the story of Ozma, who had been, when a baby, stolen by a wicked old witch and transformed into a boy. She didn't know that she had ever been a girl until she was restored to her natural form by a kind sorceress. Then it was found that she was the only child of the former ruler of Oz and was entitled to rule in his place. Ozma had many adventures, however, before she regained her father's throne, and in these she was accompanied by a pumpkin-headed man, a highly magnified and thoroughly educated Wogglebug, and a wonderful sawhorse that had been brought to life by means of a magic powder. The Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman had also assisted her, But the cowardly lion who ruled the great forest as the king of beasts knew nothing of Ozma until after she became the reigning princess of Oz. Then he journeyed to the Emerald City to see her, and on hearing she was about to visit the land of Ev to set free the royal family of that country, the cowardly lion begged to go with her, and brought along his friend, the hungry tiger, as well. Having heard this story, Dorothy related to them her own adventures, and then went out with her friends to find the sawhorse, which Ozma had caused to be shod with plates of gold, so that its legs would not wear out. They came upon the sawhorse standing motionless beside the garden gate, but when Dorothy was introduced to him, he bowed politely and blinked his eyes, which were knots of wood, and wagged his tail, which was only the branch of a tree. "What a remarkable thing to be alive!" exclaimed Dorothy. "I quite agree with you," replied the sawhorse, in a rough but not unpleasant voice. "A creature like me has no business to live, as we all know. But it was the magic powder that did it, so I cannot justly be blamed." "Of course not," said Dorothy. "And you seem to be of some use, 'cause I noticed the scarecrow riding upon your back." "Oh, yes, I'm of use," returned the sawhorse, "and I never tire, never have to be fed or cared for in any way." "Are you intelligent?" asked the girl. "Not very," said the creature. "It would be foolish to waste intelligence on a common sawhorse, when so many professors need it. But I know enough to obey my masters and to giddy up or whoa when I'm told to, so I'm pretty well satisfied." That night Dorothy slept in a pleasant little bedchamber next to that occupied by Ozma of Oz, and Billina perched upon the foot of the bed and tucked her head under her wing and slept as soundly as that position as did Dorothy upon her soft cushions. But before daybreak everyone was awake and stirring, and soon the adventurers were eating a hasty breakfast in the great dining room of the palace. Ozma sat at the head of a long table on a raised platform, with Dorothy on her right hand and the Scarecrow on her left. The Scarecrow didn't eat, of course, but Ozma placed him near her so that she might ask his advice about the journey while she ate. Lower down the table were the 27 warriors of Oz, and at the end of the room the lion and the tiger were eating out of a kettle that had been placed upon the floor, while Billina fluttered around to pick up any scraps that might be scattered. It didn't take long to finish the meal, and then the lion and the tiger were harnessed to the chariot, and the party was ready to start for the Gnome King's palace. First rode Ozma with Dorothy beside her in the golden chariot and holding Billina fast in her arms. Then came the Scarecrow on the sawhorse with the Tin Woodman and Tik-Tok marching side by side just behind him. After these tramped the army, looking brave and handsome in their splendid uniforms. The generals commanded the colonels, and the colonels commanded the majors, and the majors commanded the captains, and the captains commanded the private, who marched with an air of proud importance behind because it required so many officers to give him his orders. And so the magnificent procession left the palace and started along the road just as day was breaking, and by the time the sun came out they had made good progress toward the valley that led to the Gnome King's domain. Chapter 10. The Giant with the Hammer. The road led for a time through a pretty farm country, and then past a picnic grove that was very inviting. But the procession continued to steadily advance, and Billina cried in an abrupt and commanding manner, "Wait! Wait!" Ozma stopped her chariot so suddenly that the Scarecrow's sawhorse nearly ran into it, and the ranks of the army tumbled over one another before they could come to a halt. Immediately the yellow hen struggled from Dorothy's arms and flew into a clump of bushes by the roadside. "What's the matter?" called the Tin Woodman anxiously. "Why, Billina wants to lay her egg, that's all," said Dorothy. Lay her egg, repeated the Tin Woodman in astonishment. Yes, she lays one every morning about this time, and it's quite fresh, said the girl. But does your foolish old hen suppose that this entire cavalcade, which is bound on an important adventure, is going to stand still while she lays her egg? Inquired the Tin Woodman earnestly. What else can we do? Asked the girl. It's a habit of Bellina's, and she can't break herself of it. Then she must hurry up, said the Tin Woodman impatiently. No, no, exclaimed the Scarecrow. If she hurries, she may lay scrambled eggs. That's nonsense, said Dorothy. But Bellina won't be long, I'm sure. So they stood and waited, although all were restless and anxious to proceed, and by the yellow hen came from the bushes, saying, Cut, 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 cut. Cut, cut, cut. What is she doing? Singing her lay? Asked the Scarecrow. Forward, march! Shouted the Tin Woodman, waving his axe, and the procession started just as Dorothy had once more grabbed Bellina in her arms. Isn't anyone going to get my egg? Cried the hen in her great excitement. I'll get it, said the Scarecrow, and at his command the Sawhorse pranced into the bushes. The straw man soon found the egg, which he placed in his jacket pocket. The cavalcade, having moved rapidly on, was even then far in advance, but it didn't take the Sawhorse long to catch up with it, and presently the Scarecrow was riding in his accustomed place behind Ozma's chariot. What shall I do with the egg? He asked Dorothy. I don't know, the girl answered. Perhaps the hungry tiger would like it. It would not be enough to fill one of my back teeth, remarked the tiger. A bushel of them, hard boiled, might take a little of the edge off my appetite, but one egg isn't good for anything at all that I know of. No, it wouldn't even make a sponge cake, said the Scarecrow thoughtfully. The tin Woodman might carry it with his axe and hatchet, but after all, I may as well keep it myself for a souvenir. So he left it in his pocket. They had now reached that part of the valley that lay between the two high mountains which Dorothy had seen from her tower window. At the far end was the third great mountain, which blocked the valley and was the northern edge of the land of Ev. It was underneath this mountain that the Gnome King's palace was said to be, but it would be some time before they reached that place. The path was becoming rocky and difficult for the wheels of the chariot to pass over, and presently a deep gulf appeared at their feet, which was too wide for them to leap. So Ozma took a small square of green cloth from her pocket and threw it upon the ground. At once it became the magic carpet and unrolled itself far enough for all the cavalcade to walk upon. The chariot now advanced, and the green carpet unrolled before it, crossing the gulf on a level with its banks, so that all passed over it safely. That's easy enough, said the Scarecrow. I wonder what will happen next. He was not long in making the discovery, for the sides of the mountain came closer together, until finally there was but a narrow path between them, along which Ozma and her party were forced to pass in single file. They now heard a low and deep thump, 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 which echoed throughout the valley and seemed to grow louder as they advanced. Then, turning a corner of rock, they saw before them a huge form, which towered above the path for more than 100 feet. The form was that of a gigantic man built out of plates of cast iron, and it stood with one foot on the other side of the narrow road and swung over its right shoulder an immense iron mallet, with which it constantly pounded the earth. These resounding blows explained the thumping sounds they had heard, for the mallet was much bigger than a barrel, and where it struck the path between the rocky sides of the mountain, it filled all the space through which our travelers would be obliged to pass. Of course, they at once halted, a safe distance away from the terrible iron mallet. The magic carpet would do them no good in this case, for it was only meant to protect them from any dangers upon the ground beneath their feet, and not from dangers that appeared in the air above them. "Wow," said the Cowardly Lion with a shudder. "It makes me dreadfully nervous to see that big hammer pounding so near my head. One blow would crush me into a doormat." "The Iron Giant is a fellow," said Tik-Tok, "and works as steadily as a clock. He was made from the Gnome King by Smith and Tinker, who made me, and his duty is to keep folks from finding the underground palace. Is he not a great work of art?" "Can he think and speak as you do?" asked Ozma, regarding the giant with wondering eyes. "No," replied the machine. "He is only 2 pound the road, and has no thinking or speaking attachment. But he pounds very well, I think." "Too well," observed the Scarecrow. "He's keeping us from going farther. Is there no way to stop his machinery?" "Only the Gnome King, who has the key, can do that," answered Tik-Tok. "Then," said Dorothy anxiously, "what shall we do?" "Excuse me for a few minutes," said the Scarecrow, "and I will think it over." He retired then to a position in the rear, where he turned his painted face to the rocks and began to think. Meantime, the giant continued to raise his iron mallet high in the air and to strike the path terrific blows that echoed through the mountains like the roar of a cannon. Each time the mallet lifted, however, there was a moment when the path beneath the monster was free, and perhaps the Scarecrow had noticed this, for when he came back to the others, he said, "The matter is a very simple one after all. We have but to run under the hammer, one at a time, when it is lifted, and pass to the other side before it falls again." "It will require quick work if we escape the blow," said the Tin Woodman, with a shake of his head. "But it really seems the only thing to be done. Who will make the first attempt?" They looked at one another hesitatingly for a moment. Then the Cowardly Lion, who was trembling like a leaf in the wind, said to them, "I suppose the head of the procession must go first, and that's me, but I'm terribly afraid of the big hammer." "What will become of me?" asked Ozma. "You might rush under the hammer yourself, but the chariot would surely be crushed." "We must leave the chariot," said the Scarecrow. "But you 2 girls can ride upon the backs of the lion and the tiger." So this was decided upon, and Ozma, as soon as the lion was unfastened from the chariot, at once mounted the beast's back and said she was ready. "Cling fast to his mane," advised Dorothy. "I used to ride him myself, and that's the way I held on." So Ozma clung fast to the mane, and the lion crouched in the path and eyed the swinging mallet carefully until he knew just the instant it would begin to rise in the air. Then, before anyone thought he was ready, he made a sudden leap straight between the Iron Giant's legs, and before the mallet struck the ground again, the lion and Ozma were safe on the other side. The tiger went next. Dorothy sat upon his back and locked her arms around his striped neck, for he had no mane to cling to. He made the leap straight and true as an arrow from a bow, and ere Dorothy realized it, she was out of danger and standing by Ozma's side. Now came the Scarecrow on the Sawhorse, and while they made the dash in safety, they were within a hair's breadth of being caught by the descending hammer. Tik-Tok walked up to the very edge of the spot the hammer struck. As it was raised for the next blow, he calmly stepped forward and escaped its ascent. That was an idea for the Tin Woodman to follow, and he also crossed in safety while the great hammer was in the air. But when it came to the 26 officers and the private, their knees were so weak that they could not walk a step. "In battle we are wonderfully courageous," said one of the generals, and our foes find us very terrible to face. But war is one thing, and this is another. When it comes to being pounded upon the head by an iron hammer and smashed into pancakes, we naturally object." "Make a run for it," urged the Scarecrow. "Our knees shake so that we cannot run," answered a captain. "If we should try it, we would all certainly be pounded to a jelly." "Well, well," sighed the Cowardly Lion. "I see, friend Tiger, that we must place ourselves in great danger to rescue this bold army. Come with me, and we will do the best we can." So Ozma and Dorothy, having already dismounted from their backs, the lion and the tiger leaped back again under the awful hammer and returned, two generals clinging to their necks. They repeated this daring passage 12 times, when all the officers had been carried beneath the giant's legs and landed safely on the further side. By that time the beasts were very tired and panted so hard that their tongues hung out of their great mouths. "But what is to become of the private?" asked Ozma. "Oh, leave him there to guard the chariot," said the lion. "I'm tired out and won't pass under that mallet again." The officers at once protested that they must have the private with them, else there would be no one of them to command. But neither the lion nor the tiger would go after him, and so the Scarecrow sent the Sawhorse. Either the wooden horse was careless, or it failed to properly time the descent of the hammer, for the mighty weapon caught it squarely upon its head and thumped it against the ground so powerfully that the private flew off its back high into the air and landed upon one of the giant's cast iron arms. Here he clung desperately while the arm rose and fell with each one of the rapid strokes. The Scarecrow dashed in to rescue his Sawhorse and had his left foot smashed by the hammer before he could pull the creature out of danger. They then found that the Sawhorse had been badly dazed by the blow, for while the hard wooden knot of which his head was formed could not be crushed by the hammer, but his ears were broken off, and he would be unable to hear a sound until some new ones were made for him. Also, his left knee was cracked and had to be bound up with a string. Billina having fluttered under the hammer, it now remained only to rescue the private who was riding upon the iron giant's arm high in the air. The Scarecrow lay flat upon the ground and called to the man to jump down upon his body, which was soft because it was stuffed with straw. This the private managed to do, waiting until a time when he was nearest the ground, and then letting himself drop upon the Scarecrow. He accomplished the feat without breaking any bones, and the Scarecrow declared he was not injured in the least. Therefore, the Tin Woodman having by this time fitted new ears to the Sawhorse, the entire party proceeded upon its way, leaving the giant to pound the path behind them.